The Pizza Bomber Case, Brian Wells, a bizarre and twisted crime. August 28, 2003, Erie, Pennsylvania. A quiet afternoon turns into chaos when a middle-aged pizza delivery man walks into a bank wearing a metal collar locked around his neck. The collar isn't just strange, it's a bomb. People inside the bank freeze. The man, calm but shaking, hands the teller a note. It says the bomb will explode if they don't give him $250,000. His name is Brian Wells, and in just minutes, the entire town will be watching what happens to him on live television. Police rush to the scene as Brian sits on the pavement, surrounded by flashing lights. He begs the officers to help him, saying, "It's gonna go off. I'm not lying." The sound of the ticking bomb fills the air. Everyone backs away, afraid to get too close. Then, boom! The blast echoes across the street. The crowd screams. Cameras catch everything. The pizza man is gone in an instant. But here's the twist. Was Brian Wells really a victim, or was he part of the plan all along? Earlier that day, Brian had received a pizza order like any other, 2 pies to be delivered to a strange address at the end of a dirt road near a television tower. He didn't know it yet, but that delivery would lead him into one of the most bizarre crimes in American history. The call came from a payphone not far from his shop, Mamma Mia's Pizzeria. The customer's voice sounded normal, polite even. Nothing about it suggested danger. But the location, it was odd. It was isolated, surrounded by woods, far from any houses. Still, Brian was known for never saying no to an order. So he grabbed the pizzas, got in his rusty white Geo Metro, and drove off. When he arrived, things got strange fast. There was no house, just a tall transmission tower and a dusty path. And there, waiting for him, were a few people he didn't recognize. What happened next has never been fully proven, but police believe that's when the collar bomb was placed around his neck. Brian told investigators that he was attacked and forced to wear it. The bomb, he said, was connected to a scavenger hunt of clues around town, clues that could supposedly stop it from exploding. He had a set of papers with handwritten instructions. Drive here, find this, deliver the money. But something didn't add up. The directions were almost impossible to finish in time. Some stops were miles apart. Experts later said it seemed like the game was designed to make sure he would fail, and the bomb would go off no matter what. As detectives started digging deeper, they found even stranger pieces to the puzzle. The people who called in the pizza order weren't random. They were part of a small group of locals, each with a secret connection to one another. There was Marjorie Deal Armstrong, a woman with a long history of mental illness and violence. Her ex-boyfriends often turned up dead or missing. Then there was Kenneth Barnes, a handyman who said he was promised money to help with a crazy plan. According to police, these two, along with others, created an unbelievable scheme, one that mixed greed, lies, and manipulation. But why involve Brian Wells, an ordinary pizza man? Was he tricked, or did he know more than he claimed? As night fell over Erie, investigators searched Brian's small apartment. Inside, they found simple things: puzzles, TV guides, and change jars. Nothing about him screamed criminal. His co-workers said he was quiet, friendly, and loved his job. But one clue caught the FBI's attention: a note in his car describing a series of steps he was supposed to follow after robbing the bank. It mentioned driving to different spots to get keys that would remove the bomb. Every location on that list existed, yet when agents checked them, the clues led nowhere. It was like a cruel maze. The next morning, news channels across the U.S. ran the story non-stop. The pizza bomber case instantly became one of America's most shocking crimes. Everyone wanted to know who built the bomb, who made Brian rob the bank, and most importantly, who was really in control. The answers, as they turned out, were even stranger than anyone could imagine. The morning after the explosion, the streets of Erie were quiet, but the town buzzed with fear. Police tape still fluttered in the wind where Brian Wells had died. Reporters surrounded the scene, their microphones pointed at officers who refused to say much. Behind closed doors, the FBI, ATF, and local police had already joined forces. They knew one thing: this was no ordinary robbery. The collar bomb wasn't some homemade joke. It was a professional device, made with precision and built to kill. Investigators examined every piece of metal left on the pavement. The collar had multiple locks, wires, and a timer. Inside were tiny explosives packed around a steel plate to make sure the blast went straight into Brian's neck. Whoever made it knew exactly what they were doing. But the question still hung in the air. Was Brian Wells really a victim, or was he part of the plan all along? As agents traced Brian's final movements, they discovered a strange link. Before the robbery, he had spent time with a man named Bill Rothstein, who lived near the TV tower where Brian made his last delivery. Rothstein wasn't just any local. He was smart, quiet, and had once worked as a handyman and teacher. When police questioned him, he seemed calm, even helpful. But there was something off. Rothstein lived in a big old house filled with tools, gadgets, and metal parts, exactly the kind of place where a bomb could be built.
Then, weeks after Brian's death, Rothstein called 911 himself. "I have a body in my freezer," he said. The words stunned detectives. When they arrived, they found the frozen body of a man named James Roden. Rothstein claimed he didn't kill him. He said his ex-girlfriend, Marjorie Deal Armstrong, had done it, and he had only helped hide the body. Marjorie was already known to police. She was brilliant but dangerous, diagnosed with bipolar disorder and a history of violent behavior. She had once shot a boyfriend in self-defense, but many believed there was more to that story. Now she was back in the spotlight, and investigators started to wonder, could she and Rothstein have planned the pizza bomber crime together? Agents began piecing together connections between all the players. Marjorie, who always wanted money and control. Rothstein, the genius who could build complex devices. Kenneth Barnes, who said he needed cash to hire a hitman for his girlfriend's murder. And Brian Wells, the quiet pizza man who somehow ended up wearing a bomb. One witness claimed that Brian actually knew some of these people before the robbery. Another said he might have agreed to be part of a fake heist, thinking the bomb was a prop, not real. If that was true, it meant Brian was tricked into his own death. FBI agents interviewed Marjorie in prison after she was caught for killing Roden. She denied everything about the bank robbery, saying Rothstein was the real mastermind. But every time they asked for details, her story changed. One minute, she claimed she barely knew Brian Wells. The next, she hinted that he was involved. Her behavior was erratic, laughing one second, shouting the next. But through all the chaos, one thing was clear: she was hiding something. Investigators began to suspect that Rothstein and Marjorie had planned to steal money from the bank and use Brian as the fall guy. The collar bomb, they believed, was their way to make sure no one could talk after the robbery. When they searched Rothstein's garage, they found tools, papers, and parts that matched the design of the bomb. They also found notes, detailed calculations that looked like they belonged to an engineer. It was enough to make him the main suspect. But before he could face charges, Rothstein died from cancer. He never confessed, never went to trial, and took most of the truth with him. Still, the FBI didn't give up. They turned their attention back to Marjorie and Barnes. In 2007, Barnes agreed to talk in exchange for a lighter sentence. He told agents that Marjorie had been the mastermind. She wanted money to pay him for killing her father, who she claimed was abusing her inheritance. Barnes said the plan was to rob the bank, get the cash, and use Brian to do it, because he was innocent-looking and easy to control. According to Barnes, the bomb was real from the start. Brian thought it was fake, and that he'd be released once the money was collected. But Marjorie and Rothstein never planned to let him live. That confession tied most of the loose ends together, but not all. Some investigators still believe Brian knew more than he let on. Others think he was completely innocent, caught in a trap that was meant to kill him either way. Even years later, the case remained one of the most confusing crimes in America, a mix of greed, lies, mental illness, and death. By 2010, Marjorie Diehl Armstrong was finally charged for her role in the pizza bomber case. During her trial, she ranted, shouted, and accused everyone of lying. The jury watched hours of her interviews where she constantly changed her story. The evidence was overwhelming. The bomb parts, the notes, the witness statements, and Barnes's testimony all pointed to her. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. But even after the verdict, she kept saying one thing: Bill Rothstein was the mastermind. I just helped. By the time the FBI closed in on the case, years had passed since that deadly afternoon in Erie. But for many agents, something still didn't sit right. The pieces didn't fit neatly. There were too many odd details, too many half-truths, and too many secrets buried with Bill Rothstein. Why did he have blueprints of the bomb? Why was his handwriting on the scavenger hunt notes? And why did every person connected to him seem to either die or disappear soon after speaking with investigators? The more they dug, the stranger it got. Rothstein's old friends described him as a genius who liked mind games. He fixed machines, built gadgets, and loved puzzles. He also had a dark sense of humor, the kind of man who might build a real bomb just to prove he could. Inside his home, the FBI found hand-drawn maps of the exact route Brian was told to drive. They found test wires, metal collars, and even tools used to shape steel plates, all matching the device that killed Brian. But the biggest mystery wasn't how the bomb was made. It was why it was made. Was this just a robbery gone wrong? Or something much deeper? A twisted plan for power and control? As agents reviewed the interviews again, a pattern appeared. Marjorie and Rothstein's stories overlapped in strange ways. She said she wanted money for her future. He said he wanted to prove how smart he was. Both were obsessed with control, over people, over life, over death. Kenneth Barnes told agents that Rothstein had once bragged, saying he could build a perfect crime, a plan so complicated that no one would ever solve it. And in many ways, he was right. Even with all the evidence, investigators couldn't prove exactly who started it, or who gave the order to put the bomb on Brian's neck. Meanwhile,
The people of Erie couldn't stop talking about it. News crews returned every year, filming documentaries, podcasts, and TV shows. Everyone had a theory. Some said Brian Wells was a victim, forced into the robbery at gunpoint. Others believed he was tricked into thinking it was a fake heist, part of a game that went horribly wrong.
His family begged for the world to see him as innocent. Brian was kind, his sister said. He loved simple things, puzzles, pets, and pizza. He didn't deserve to die that way. In 2017, nearly 14 years after the explosion, Netflix released Evil Genius, a documentary that brought the case back into the spotlight. Millions of people watched in disbelief as the real recordings played. Brian sitting in the road, pleading for help, with police frozen in fear just feet away. The documentary showed never-before-seen interviews with Marjorie Diehl Armstrong, older, weaker, but still defiant. She denied being the mastermind, even as she admitted to knowing the others involved. "You think you know everything," she told the interviewer, "but you don't. You never will." Those words sent chills through viewers around the world. Later that same year, Marjorie died in prison from cancer. She never confessed. She never apologized. With her death, the last living link to the truth vanished. The FBI officially closed the case, declaring that Brian Wells was an unwitting participant, meaning he didn't know the bomb was real. He was part of the plan, but he didn't understand how deadly it really was. To this day, some agents still believe he was chosen for one simple reason. He was easy to control, easy to trick, and easy to blame. In the end, what happened in Erie wasn't just a crime. It was a nightmare built by people who loved manipulation more than money. It was a plan so cruel and strange that it felt like something out of a movie. But it wasn't. It was real. The pizza bomber case left behind scars that still haunt the town and questions that may never have clear answers. Who truly wrote the scavenger notes? How many people were really involved? And why did none of them ever come clean? Maybe that's the scariest part, that sometimes the most twisted crimes don't come from monsters hiding in the dark, but from ordinary people living right next door. Years have passed since that terrifying day in Erie, Pennsylvania, but the echoes of the pizza bomber case still linger like a ghost that refuses to fade. The city has tried to move on. The bank where Brian Wells walked in that afternoon has long been remodeled. The parking lot where he died is now quiet, covered in cracks and grass. Most people who pass by have no idea that one of America's strangest crimes happened right there. But for the FBI agents who worked the case, for the reporters who followed every twist, and for Brian's family, the story never really ended. It changed the way they saw justice, truth, and trust forever. After the case closed, hundreds of pages of evidence became public. Photos of the bomb, the handwritten scavenger notes, and recordings of the police radio calls that day. People could finally see how detailed, how cruel, and how carefully planned the crime really was. The bomb itself wasn't random. It was a mechanical nightmare, built like a professional trap. The collar had multiple locks, a timer, and fake wires meant to confuse bomb experts. The scavenger hunt notes were written like a game, with clues leading to dead ends. The instructions told Brian to rob the bank, then drive across town to collect keys that would unlock the bomb. But experts later discovered the truth: none of those keys actually existed. Every single step was meant to waste time, until the device exploded. That meant Brian Wells never stood a chance. From the very start, he was a dead man walking. The FBI called it one of the most complex investigations in U.S. history. They interviewed more than 1,000 witnesses,
searched dozens of properties, and spent over 2 years trying to trace the origin of every wire, note, and piece of metal. But the more they learned, the less sense it made. Why would someone go through so much trouble for just $250,000, a sum that, in the end, was never even taken? Why create a plan so complicated that it destroyed everyone involved, including the masterminds themselves? Some agents started to believe that the robbery wasn't really about money at all. It was about control. Bill Rothstein, the man believed to have built the bomb, once told friends he was smarter than anyone else in Erie. He loved proving he could outthink the police. To him, the perfect crime wasn't one that made money. It was one that nobody could solve. When he died before his trial, it left the investigation hanging forever. Without his confession, there was no full truth, only theories. Some FBI files suggest that Rothstein may have manipulated everyone around him, including Marjorie and Brian. He had the technical skill, the intelligence, and the cold patience to make it happen. Marjorie, on the other hand, was the emotional engine. Her life was chaos, filled with mental illness, anger, and greed. She had lost people she claimed to love and always seemed to find herself at the center of tragedy.
Kenneth Barnes was the third piece, the middleman, motivated by desperation and the promise of easy money. Together, they formed a triangle of chaos: genius, madness, and greed, and somewhere in the middle stood Brian Wells, an ordinary man trapped in their game. The tragedy of Brian Wells still raises painful questions. If he was tricked, why didn't the police believe him in time? If he was guilty, why would he risk his life wearing a real bomb? If he was innocent, why did he take that delivery to such a strange and lonely spot? To this day, no one can answer those questions completely. Some believe Brian knew a small part of the plan. Maybe he thought he was helping with a fake robbery. Others say he was chosen because he was gentle, lonely, and easy to deceive. But one fact is clear. When Brian sat on the ground that day, surrounded by police cars and TV cameras, he wasn't acting. His voice was shaking. His fear was real. He truly believed he was about to die. And he did. Years later, new details continued to surface. In interviews, former FBI agents admitted that even after closing the case, they weren't satisfied. One of them said, "Every time I look back at the photos, I see something new, something we might have missed." Another agent confessed that he still keeps a piece of the bomb's metal casing locked in a drawer as a reminder of what obsession and evil can create when they mix. The case was unlike anything they had ever seen. It blurred the line between victim and criminal, between genius and madness, and between truth and lies. In Erie, some locals still whisper that Rothstein had help from people who were never caught, that maybe there are more notes, more blueprints, hidden somewhere in his old home, or buried in the woods near the TV tower. One neighbor swore he once saw Rothstein testing something that looked like a collar weeks before the crime. Another claimed he saw Marjorie's car parked near the tower on the same day Brian disappeared. But with both of them gone, the truth is now buried with them. For Brian's family, the pain never healed. His mother, Louise, often told reporters, "My son didn't deserve to die like that. He was kind, he was trusting, and that trust killed him." She passed away a few years after the explosion, still fighting to clear his name. To her, Brian wasn't a criminal. He was the final victim of a plan too evil to imagine. Even the FBI later admitted that Brian was not the mastermind. He may have played a small part, but he didn't design the bomb, didn't write the notes, and didn't plan his own death. He was simply caught in the middle of a storm he never saw coming. The pizza bomber case didn't just change Erie. It changed how law enforcement looked at crime itself. It taught investigators that evil doesn't always look like a monster in the dark.
Sometimes it looks like a neighbor who smiles politely, a handyman who offers to fix your car, or a woman who claims she just wants to talk. That's what made this crime so terrifying. It showed that the most twisted minds can hide behind the most ordinary faces. Today, more than 20 years later, documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube channels still revisit the case. Each time, new viewers are left with the same stunned expression, trying to understand how such a bizarre plan could ever be real. But it was. Every moment, every explosion, every clue, it all really happened. The pizza bomber case remains one of the most haunting true crimes in U.S. history because it wasn't just about greed or money. It was about control, manipulation, and the terrifying power of the human mind when it loses all empathy. And maybe that's why people can't stop watching it, because deep down, it forces us to face an uncomfortable truth, that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who believe they're smarter than everyone else. The town of Erie has grown quieter now. The TV tower still stands tall, rusted by years of rain and wind. Some nights, locals say you can still hear strange noises echoing from the woods, the same path where Brian made his last delivery. It's just the wind, they tell themselves, but others say it feels heavier, like the past is whispering through the trees, reminding everyone that some crimes never truly end. And that is the pizza bomber case, a story of genius, greed, and betrayal. A story that proved real life can be stranger, darker, and more shocking than fiction.
But what if I told you there's another real American crime? One that started with a simple phone call, just like Brian's pizza delivery, and ended with a twist even the FBI didn't see coming. Join me next time as we uncover another true story from the heart of the United States, where ordinary people find themselves trapped in extraordinary crimes. Because in the world of true crime, every story hides a darker truth.